This is Steve Von Till, and this is the Vulgar Display of Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Vulgar Display of Podcast, live from the Barn Studio in Southeast Missouri. You got the Mox here. I'm joined online right now with a special guest, a legend in the making, a legend in the past, a legend in the future, all the above, right? Steve Von Till. Steve, how are you, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'd say more than anything, legend in the classroom, right? Because you're rocking with some third graders, fourth graders. What grade do you teach?
Fourth. I did 5 years of second when I started. I did a couple years of third, and for the last, 16, 17, 18 years have been fourth grade. That taps out my math skills about right there.
So my wife's a teacher. She's a first grade teacher, and I was in the education system for a while. And, I have some opinions on that, and maybe you do too, but I just think it's such important work. And I wasn't aware that you were doing that, but it kind of makes sense as far as like scheduling wise, because you have the summers off and then you can go on tours or make records or whatever. So it kind of fits the lifestyle a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, coming from the background we come from, Neurosis came out of the DIY punk rock, movement. We never expected any money from music. It's a passion and a labor of love, and it's the same ethics in which I run our record label I'm in our barn right now, and the record label office is right over there. And, I go work a day job like anybody else to pay for my passion, and then come home and work on music, whether it's putting out other people's or our own or in here. The smallest amounts of time are in here doing the cool stuff, making the sounds. But, it's all just part of it. It's all part of finding a balanced life. I don't have to, I'm not beholden to anybody for any aspect of my art or music, and keep it pure. And I think, teaching, public school teachers don't get paid what we deserve, but we do only have to work 180 something days a year, right? So we do have, I find that a good amount of time to be able to balance music with, for sure.
Do your students, that can be an inquisitive bunch of, especially age. Do they know what you do? Does it feel like you have two lives in a way, or are they familiar with what you do and what your other, roles are?
They know I play music and that I go on tour and that I travel and that I've been around the world, because, teachers share their experiences and their knowledge with kids, and we're talking about the world. And but I don't make a big deal about it, and if anything, I use it as an educational moment to let them know that not all artists and musicians are rock stars like they see on TV. That it is, if you want to do art or music, you just do it because you love it, and you don't do it for any other reason. And so they know I do that, and there's Google, so. But I don't think they have any context for what universe I make music in, Some of the parents do, just a few, not very many. But
yeah, I just think that's very interesting, and I could see how that you could make that work, where, like you said, maybe it frees up a little bit more because of the schedule is, I think that's the trade-off, right? Because I agree with you. Teachers don't make as much as they should. I think that's just a lot of people think that, right? That's not a new thought. But the trade-off is that the schedule's pretty flexible. You're off pretty early in the day, and then you get other breaks off as well. So yeah, that just totally made sense to me that you were doing that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's super rewarding. I get immediate feedback, and the benefits I get back from, you know, just knowing I'm doing something important and seeing the difference it makes to these little ones, that they know they've got more adults in their corner that give a shit is important.
I'm a therapist now, but I still work with a lot of youth and actually at-risk youth.
Oh,
Um,
superhero stuff. Right on. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate that, but I feel working with that age group, it keeps me youthful in many ways, and it gives me sort of a energy boost that maybe I don't always have. Do you feel that with your work?
I definitely don't feel like I'm in my mid 50s. I think the
Yeah.
combination of, yeah, well, first of all, my sense of humor hasn't evolved much past 9, 10 years old. But I think it does. It gives me energy, but that in combination, I think, with being creative, and making music um, and being constantly inspired and not feeling like I'm ever in a drudge. Like sometimes I meet some folks that they're having a hard time as teachers, because sometimes there's a lot of blowback, especially in communities like ours, ultra conservative um, blowback, thinking that we're indoctrinating their kids into something in the curriculum that's not actually there. Um, but and there's a lot of burnout. But I honestly, I just feel a real sense of gratitude that I stumbled into this career. All my careers, because they all feel rewarding, they all feel important, and they all, I think, contribute to me staying vital. Even on my worst day at work, I mean, I'm working with kids. They've got an excuse to act like children, where some people have to work with adults that act like children.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. That was actually one of the reasons I got out of education was I found myself getting along better, understanding the kids more than sometimes the adults. I felt like a lot of times the adults got in the way of the education in many ways. So that was just my own frustration with it.
Yeah. I've been doing it long enough, man. They don't matter.
Yeah.
I just do it. I do the right thing.
I tell my own kids, so you don't have to listen to dad. Anything I say, you don't have to listen to me. But one thing I would want to see with you in your life is to find something that you do love, you absolutely love. Because I've had jobs, and we probably all had jobs where you just hate it. You get up and it's just you driving to work and it's just like awful. And it's a dreadful 8 hours or whatever. But if you actually are doing something that you love and it's your passion, it sounds cliche, but it never feels like work. I never get up in the morning and go, oh, I got to go to work. Or even like on like a Sunday where maybe I'd be like, oh, I had work the next day. I don't have that feeling anymore. So I tell my own kids that. And I'm like you, it's like I kind of stumbled on it. It wasn't, I didn't wake up as a young boy. I thought I was going to be in the NFL. I didn't go, I'm going to work with at-risk youths one day, but I kind of just stumbled into it and then found my passion that way.
Yeah. Yeah, me too, man. I literally was like, was just doing odd jobs and went on tour. And every time you go on tour, you have to quit your job or lose your job and go get some other temp job. And at one point, I was just like, you know what? We gotta slow this down so we don't have to. We're trying to play too many shows per year, and we're not making any difference financially, and we're not being good husbands and dads, and soon we're going to be compromising the art if we feel like it's a drudge. So let's find stuff that matters. And literally, by the time I was halfway through the sentence, I'm thinking about working with kids. Somebody threw me in a classroom because California had when I lived there, they'd passed a law, great law, 20-1 in K through 3. You're not allowed to have more than 20 students in a classroom,
Mm.
kindergarten through third grade. The problem of that was there weren't enough teachers.
All
So
right.
if you had a 4-year degree in anything, I had a bachelor's in sociology, which I only had because my family, that's what you did. You go to college and you do something. So I went to college and got a random degree while I was doing neurosis stuff in the library all the time. But um,
You could be
and
weird with a sociology degree, or right? You could
absolutely,
be the
yeah,
weird guy in the library.
yep, totally like sampling weird art, sound art and
Yeah, the people.
records
Oh,
from the library. Yeah.
that's just a sociology guy.
Um, but yeah, but they had a thing where if you were willing to go in a classroom, you could literally start right then if you were willing to work in at-risk neighborhoods and take your classes at night. Man, that was perfect for me because I don't think I could have done the traditional. I already had a family, a young family, and couldn't do the work for free for a year, kind of, you know,
Yeah,
business that most people have to do. So it was perfect. I got to learn under fire on the job in the deep end, and it came really naturally. I think it's just something I'm supposed to be doing.
man. And I feel. Tell me if you feel this way, but I feel that's where the best learning. That's where you learn the most, right? Is like hands on. Just jump right in. We'll figure it out as we go. We'll make mistakes, right? Things aren't going to
Yeah,
be perfect. We're going to make mistakes, but we're going to learn way better that way than in some class behind a, you know, behind a book or a.
yeah. It made me really resent like when the classes at night weren't giving me useful information that I could use right
Yeah,
then. I was like, oh, you know,
yeah,
I'm going to work. I'm teaching tomorrow. Like, give me something.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, what I'm reading here, Johnny isn't doing that in here. That's not what my classroom looks like. Yeah, give me something helpful. You mentioned the art. Let's get into this music if you don't mind, man. I'm loving this new stuff.
Please.
Um, your upcoming album is one of three, right? On Triptych. This is part one that you're releasing. We have Give Your Heart to the Hawk. Tell us a little bit about that. Love how beautiful and ambient it is and all the soundscapes and everything. Tell us a little bit about it.
That song, that's track two on the record. Harvest, just kind of back up a little bit. So Harvestman is kind of like my no rules catch-all for all the things that I don't get to express in the heavy music or in the stuff under my own name, which is a little bit more songwriter oriented. They're actually crafted songs. This Harvestman is more like I've always had a home studio. I'm in, the latest version of it now, but even when I was, living at home as a teenager, I had a cassette 4-track or always some sort of thing and loved making sounds. And so Harvestman is kind of what happens when I just fire it up and see what happens. And I follow rabbit holes and stuff sits around. Sometimes I pull out old pieces that have been sitting around for 10, 20 years and rediscover it and work on it. And other times I do something start to finish in the moment just because it's inspiring me. And it's really just, I don't know, following the moment and within certain parameters of it's always kind of like my love of synths and fuzz guitars and psychedelia delays, taking folk elements and twisting them, and to give your heart to the hawk. I remember my wife was out of the country. She's from Germany for over the Christmas break, and we got a bunch of dogs and cats, and I didn't want to leave them alone in the house all the time if I was out here working in my studio on Christmas break. So I basically took a bunch of stuff from the studio and just, since I was here solo, I set it up in the living room, and we have 21-foot ceilings in an A-frame out here in the forest. And so it sounds really nice in there, but I don't really get to record in there very often. So I took a small guitar amp and my telly and started doing a really kind of simple repetitive figure on it that was really pretty, trapped it in a loop, found a couple complementary bits with it and recorded that and left it alone. Then I brought it back out here later and plugged in that bass. You can see sitting right there, my trusty old Hondo 2, a cheap one from a long time ago that when I plugged it in, I just got instant Geezer Butler vibes. And I don't know, it just, that one came together really quick, and it a nice subtle deep bass line, those pretty guitars, and then I just thought it was missing one thing, and I was watching documentary on this poet, uh, Robinson Jeffers, and I heard some of the lines that he was that were being read of his by the narrator of this documentary, and I hit play and record here in the studio and captured some of it and put it in there. It just seemed to fit really fit the mood perfectly. Is exactly what it needed. It was a series of happy accidents on top of that original guitar part.
Does that happen to you often? Because I've heard you say in interviews before that you like accidentally wrote an album, or you accidentally like kind of
That,
that. Does that happen to you a lot?
I've found that a really successful strategy for me. The more I think about something, the more it feels like beating my head against the wall, or that if it becomes too intellectual, it either loses its power, or I can't find it, you know? And so I try to put myself in situations where I allow the accidents to be captured, or I allow the energy to just flow without too much of this. The more I let it come straight out of the earth and out through the heart and the mind, and the purer it feels. It's not always magical like that, but when it is, it's completely right, And then, of course, it's all through my own filters and tastes and opinions, likes and dislikes. I mean, that's where the mental part always will come in.
If you try to force something, oftentimes it doesn't happen. Is that what you experience as well?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, and sometimes it does take hard work, and you have to hack at it and break through the wall sometimes. Um, but I think the original idea for me has to come with some sound source in my hands. It has. I have to be able to generate it and hear it. Um, like if I'm writing poetry or what, I have to have pen to paper and see it unfold, and the more it comes out without me overthinking it, usually the better it is. And I can put it away for a while, walk away from it, then come back and edit it with a clear mind. But in the moment of bringing it out of the ether or out of nothing, the moment of creation where you take something out of the sky or whatever and bring it to the world, um, the more unfiltered that is, I think the better.
For somebody that has a studio in their backyard, that's what you said, right? Your studio's in your backyard or on your property.
On the property, yeah.
I have a similar situation here. My studio is in my backyard. It's 100 feet from my house. What I've experienced with some of the things that we do is having the access to a studio all the time isn't always the best for creating. Because to me and for me, and tell me what your experience is like, it can almost be that paralysis by analysis, to where I over edit and I overthink things and I overdo things and I just pick and pick and pick until I've actually lost whatever it kind of started out as. Do you ever experience that?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, out here is where I come to really like work and dial stuff in. If I'm just in the kind of foundational creative process, sometimes I like more primitive, a more primitive setup. Like I'd rather be in the house with the shit amp, or shit little amp, or just my acoustic guitar, or even in my classroom in the lunch hour, I've got a guitar right behind my desk and I just grab it and play stuff. Or if I'm working on lyrics, I don't like to be in here. I like to be out on the back deck or something, and sometimes I'll start it, even though I have all these nice keyboards and gear in here. I've got this crappy little USB keyboard with some soft synths on my laptop, and sometimes I'll just sit at the kitchen table and I'd rather start something there. You know, I don't know why that is, but this seems to be more where I refine or I consciously record something in quality, but this isn't where necessarily the ideas are generated.
So it's more like the working lab kind of thing, I guess, right?
I think so. That's how it's feeling. Yeah.
Is your uh is your art just an extension of who you are?
It's a good question. Um, I would think so. I mean, to a certain extent. Um, Although in a lot of ways I feel like the art and the music is so much bigger than I am, you know? Um, I don't often feel I don't feel like my ego has any mm, major part or benefit in it, and I don't feel like it always comes from me. I think I feel more like a sense of gratitude that I get to be the conduit for some of these energies and some of these ideas, and I don't always know where it comes from. And so sometimes I think maybe it comes from the cosmos, or like I said earlier, if it's from the earth itself, or from the energy of humanity's putting out as a whole, and just kind of like being sensitive to it and tapping it. It's so, I mean, it's always filtered through my consciousness and my uh, likes and dislikes and desires and things I tend to gravitate to creatively, words I tend to use, sounds I tend to like. Um, but I think a large amount of it comes from um, the unknown place where all art and music come from. I don't know.
And when it affects people, and when it when you change people's life, or when you have so much of an effect on people's life and they tell you that and they express that to you, or you see its impact in other places where, I mean, you guys basically created a sound back in the day that's, I don't want to say carbon copied, but there's definitely influence bands that you can hear the influence from. What kind of feeling comes with that?
If somebody's telling me to my face that the music really moved them or helped them through a difficult time, it's a combination of gratitude that they're sharing that story with me. Sometimes it'll make me feel emotional that the fact that anything I've had to do has had that kind of impact. I don't often feel worthy of that type of response, and so maybe the part of me that's the negative self-talker that thinks I'm not worthy or not good enough or whatever might be embarrassed for a second and not know how to take that in. Um, but then the more sane part, just said just be grateful and just listen and take it in, because, and I guess that's where, like, not giving your ego credit, not saying, "Oh, look how great I am that I've created these things that help people." No, it's I've been a small part of a process of art and music which helps us all. I understand it because making it helps me stay sane, helps me through tough times. Like having a guitar in my hand, I just feel better. And music saves me over and over again. When I need those records, man, they're there. When I want, like what we're doing right now is one of my favorite things to do, to talk to another music fan about music. It's so exciting to talk about how music moves us and how music uh, helps us get through, or how art or poetry or any of those things just really help us connect with what's really important. What's important is not money. What's not important is fame or television or all this mindless consumerism stuff that's thrown at us. It's our connection, and I think music and art connect us in a way that most things don't.
I have this theory, so entertain me for a second, but I think right now is one of the most important times for music. You think back to the 60s where we needed music, society needed music. And coming out of what we've just kind of been through and what we're still going through, I think it's one of the most important times for music and for art.
Yeah, I don't know if I could prioritize one time over another, but I think it's a constant. Um, and it's hard to navigate it now because there's so much of it, so easily accessible. You know, these devices we're talking on right now, either you or me could drop some name of some obscure band that we think is the best thing that nobody's ever heard. 30 years ago, we'd be combing record stores or having to trade a cassette with somebody in a different country to get it. And we'll have it instantly now. You
Yeah,
know, get on YouTube and we got it.
I did hear that you were a part of the tape trading game back in the day.
Big time.
Is
Yeah.
that, is that sort of where, the almost like the beginning of a record label kind of started for you? It's sort of the same thing in a way. Was that sort of where that foundation came from? Like the organ?
Probably because it was just that whole time was, well, you know what I mentioned, come from the DIY punk rock scene. It was there weren't club scenes with shows of these kind of bands. Like you know, there it was very rare, and only in certain towns where you could actually get a proper gig in a club. You know, clubs were filled with cover bands. This was all happening in warehouses, basements, rented Eagles halls or Masons halls or whatever. You know, this was, and there weren't a lot of record labels, so people were having to do it themselves. It was book your own tour, put on your own shows. You go to Kinko's and you design the flyer with a glue stick and a Sharpie, and you make the flyer. You go hang them up around town. You get the recording studio and get your recording, whether it's a demo tape or you know you can borrow some money and figure out where to go press 500 records and tape trading was a big part of that. It was you know looking at ads in Maximum Rock and Roll or Flipside or whatever other fanzine you could get, where other people were like, hey, look, I've got a list of all these crazy live tapes, you know, and trading back and forth. And because the record stores, even if you found one that carried underground punk or metal or whatever, there was very few from foreign countries, you know, and so I think that was part of it. I wanted to be part of everything. I started a fanzine when I was a teenager. You know, I interviewed a lot of bands. I only did 3 issues with my friends, but we went on tour with Voivod once, and I reminded them, I'm like, hey, when I was like 16, I interviewed you guys for my fanzine when you played the little cowboy bar in my town.
That's
Uh, and uh, and so I think I just wanted to be a part of all of it. I wanted to put on shows. I wanted to make flyers. I wanted to put out records. I wanted to be in a band. You know, I wanted to do all of it. All of the parts that support it, I wanted to do it.
Yeah, and so I'm 43, and so my me falling in love with music really started in the late 80s. But it started with I had an uncle that was very into hard rock and metal, and for Christmas he would actually make us a tape.
Oh,
All
cool.
all of them, my cousins and his sons, we would all get a tape, and it'd be classic rock and metal and those things, but it was like the Metallica and the Black Sabbath and stuff. And I'm taking this in as a 7 or 8 year old kid, and that's
Yeah, the art of the mixtape, man. Perfect.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And we actually, even one of our podcasts is called Mixtape, the Midwest Mixtape. But yeah, that's sort of where my love started to happen. And definitely my love of rock and metal. It started then. So I might have missed, yeah, but I do remember like even like Metal Edge magazine, they would have a section where I don't know if we were trading tapes, but you would write to people that were into the same band you were in. You'd kind of become pen
Yeah,
pals.
pen pals. Yeah, for sure.
So there was definitely, a community within that. And it is weird how accessible it is these days. And there's some argument whether that's good or bad, maybe a little bit of both, probably a little bit of both, but it is crazy how far we've come in such a little time.
I agree. Yeah, in some ways it's easier to be whatever pen pals because you got all these friends, you know. But I don't know if it's nostalgia or what. But there was something about having to earn it, like having to go to the post office, how to sit down and write a letter,
Yeah.
go and mail it, you know, and sit down and make somebody a tape. You know, it took 90 minutes, you know, and make somebody a tape.
That's one of the most intimate things I think you can do. When I send a music recommendation to somebody, I'm really trying to tell them something by doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
A little bit later on, it would become burning CDs, but I was that guy. I was burning CDs and Chad's Mix One and all this. It just, music meant so much to me and means so much to me that I just wanted to share it out with the world. And I think that's what a lot of people did, especially with the tape trading.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It was, I think every town had a kind of different, since there was no internet, there wasn't an international scene. Every town had a different angle. The Bay Area was different than Chicago, was different than New York, was definitely different than, the European bands were singing in their own languages, unlike now where a lot of them are wearing Levi's and Vans and singing in English. It was like they were wearing their work clothes and their punk clothes and they're singing in their language. It was really, really different, just to have that kind of different take of these very small scenes all around the world of people doing underground music, because the mainstream wouldn't touch it. It's different now, like there's I never would have thought some of what we were listening to in the mid 80s would be filling stadiums at any point, but here we are, you know.
Yeah, and this gets talked about a lot, but how you consume music now too. It's just like I'm on to the next one, I'm on to the next one, where, even getting a tape in the mail, I mean, you would cherish that thing. You even if you didn't like it first listen, you would try to find things that you did like about it because it was like, you wouldn't get in the next one until a month later or something.
Right. And you listened to it because you couldn't just skip it. Couldn't skip the track.
Yeah. And I mean, and even like the corny stuff people talk about, the opening it up and the smelling and reading the liner notes and the thank yous and, oh, this band thanked that band and they toured with this band and I'm gonna check them out, So
Yep.
it was a whole thing that was like investigative in a way. Like I'm trying to find new music and it wasn't, on the internet. There was no.
Yeah, what shirt is that guy wearing? What band is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that looks like a cool logo. I'm gonna check them out. And just don't get that anymore. It's just like on the next one, on the next one. But somebody like you who you write collective work, pieces of work. You don't write songs, right? They're a bigger picture here. Do you feel like it's sort of a dinosaur in that way that people are just, so, lack of attention and on to the next song?
Um, no, only because I probably just don't interact with um I don't interact with people of the musically in that generation that goes after. Most of the people I interact with music wise are still buying records, and I mean I have three turntables, one in the office, one upstairs in the house, one downstairs in the house. I still, you know, have to catch myself of how many records I bought this month and still enjoy it that way. I stream it in the car like anybody else. That convenience wins, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the market dictates. But I still like to slow down when it's listening time and put on a good piece of vinyl, But so I don't really I know that I hear people say that kids are more just single oriented, song oriented, not album oriented, but I guess that's just not I don't experience that with the people I talk with about music.
How have you seen the music industry change in the 30 something years that you've been involved in it?
Luckily, we've always been outside the music industry.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys kind of created your own path.
Yeah, and we were on independent labels all the time. We started off on a label called Alchemy Records, which was just a small local label that put out us and Melvins and Poison Idea and some great records. Then we were on Lookout Records, which was again just supporting the local scene. They put out our second record, Green Day's early stuff, Operation Ivy. Back before the scene was like divided into these genres. It was just this is underground. This is
Yeah.
independent. We'd be on a bill with the Offspring and Green Day, and it wasn't weird. You'd have a rockabilly band, a crossover band, a more metal band, a '77 punk band. Like it was just a mix. stuff that wasn't mainstream. Everything was welcome. Um, so that's changed, because now it's definitely like all these types of bands play together, like all the metal sounding bands stay together, all the kind of Warped Tour pop punk bands stay together, all these. The only time you ever get the crossover is at these ridiculously huge pop festivals that mix it up, which that makes me actually kind of like those, except for the large amount of humans.
Yeah.
But I like the mixing it up because you never know where you might discover something. Why do you want to be in a music echo chamber? It's nice to be walking around and be surprised and be like, what is that? Something just grabs you and pulls you towards the speakers or towards the stage, and you're captivated by the energy or the sound, you know. But yeah, then we moved on from Lookout Records to Alternative Tentacles, which was Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys record. We did a couple records there, and that was again another just where all the freak bands were. There's lots of weird ones, and then the metal scene started changing a little bit and becoming more open-minded with Relapse Records. They were not just kind of do it because back then the metal scene was kind of unlike the punk scene and the DIY, which was founded on kind of the ethics of DIY. The metal was more of the traditional music industry model. You get the label that puts in all the money and develops the band, and the band gets paid this tiny little, a lot of pay to play kind of weird stuff going on there. But then it started to blossom and open up, and actually as punk rock became more closed-minded and siphoned off, it seemed like the heavy audience seemed to blossom. You had this label like Relapse putting out Japanese noise, Finnish death metal, and us, like all kinds of weird stuff. And it was like, whoa, okay. So we kind of just went where we were wanted, and we worked with them for a while, and then finally decided, you know what, the most appropriate place for us to be is back kind of where I was right before I joined Neurosis. Let's just start our own label. That's what I wanted to do with the band I had before that. Let's just put out records. We don't have money, but we've got experience and a fan base, so maybe people will be into it. And I don't know, now we're 150 records in or something. I don't know what. Yeah.
Crazy. Back in the late 90s, I actually saw you a couple times in St. Louis, and once with Pantera and another time with Soulfly. And those were a couple bands that probably a pretty different sound from you, but sort of championed you and championed what you guys were doing and took you out on tour. How were you received with some of those audiences? Because I mean, we know that what some of those audiences can be like.
I think, yeah, Pantera's audience didn't care about anything but Pantera.
Right.
That they just wanted to kill anybody who was up there that wasn't Pantera.
Right.
It was definitely, I mean, we were very happy to have that opportunity, because our whole thing was we don't fit in anywhere. So if we can just do our thing unrestricted and find the few freaks in the corner looking for something weird like us, and I think we did exactly that. Like we found the few people who had no idea what we were, but it resonated, and it was, again, we never captivated their audience or anything, but luckily we don't ever stop. We just make sound from beginning to end,
Yeah.
a lot of noise and get out of there. But it was definitely an education. Like the few times we got to go out with bands, and we did an Ozfest too, where we really see this kind of mainstream touring machine. We quickly realized we didn't really want to be a part of that as far as the industry part. It was definitely a lot of compromises going on. See a lot of these bands that put on their black jeans and t-shirts to go on stage, but are wearing different stuff during the day, and we're like, I don't know. I guess do what you want to do, but that's not where we're coming from.
Yeah.
But we were inspired by the work ethic of the crews, like watching the crews get there early, work all day setting up, making sure everything's right so that the show goes off and sounds good and looks good, you know, because being do it yourself, we're just kind of making it up, you know. And so for us to kind of watch uh these crews bust their ass, that really kind of like clarified our work ethic. Okay, we need to arrive early and bust ass, you know, and nobody's doing it for us. So that like I really kind of got a lot of inspiration from that, you know, and appreciate all those folks for giving us a shot to play in front of different audiences. You know, anytime we get to play in front of a different audience and again, find those couple people, that's a great opportunity.
Man, I've taken up too much of your time. Joined here with Steve Von Till of Harvestman. New album coming out April 23rd. This is the Vulgar Display of Podcast. We got Triptych 1, Part 1 coming out April 23rd, and then 2 others the rest of this year. The latest release, Give Your Heart to the Hawk. I'm just in love with this. I sent it to a couple of my buddies and said, just put it on repeat and smoke whatever you want to smoke and just enjoy it. But it's just so beautiful, man. Think so much of your work and your art and have for years. And really appreciate your time today, man.
I appreciate your time, man. Thanks for helping get the word out and for loving music and supporting it out there. It's things like this are like the record label, you know, they're important pieces of supporting music and the arts, you know. It's all part of it. So thank you.
Real quickly, are you going to tour on this?
I won't tour on the Harvestman stuff. I'm recording a new proper solo record under my own name, mixing it in July. And so since those are both kind of my small projects, I kind of try to save all the time to tour it under the stuff under my own name, but I try to integrate the vibe of Harvestman into it with sonically.
Yeah.
You know, so some of the Americana stuff, it's more messed up with synthesizers and fuzz guitars here and there and make it more psychedelic and trippy. But so I have I think a couple of shows this summer out here in the Northwest. But then I'll mostly be focusing on probably next year, getting out and doing it more to support the proper solo record.
With Steve Von Till, Harvestman, April 23rd, Triptych Part 1. We're going to be looking for the other 2 later this year. Thanks for joining us today on the Vulgar Display of Podcast, man.
Thank you.